All right, we just saw the most trivial hello world example, right? And it was all in a single file, right? Purposely, so that there was no magic and you could see everything in one single go. But it's not scalable, and it did a lot of shortcuts, and it's and so we need to flesh it out, right? We need to flesh it out a little bit. So here's the hello world again, right? But starting to spread out the code across multiple files. Like for instance, the component should be in its own component file. Yes, the container will be in its own container file. The reducer will be in its own reducer file. All right, all right, and they're all going to have to be imported from each other. Also, the function that is generating the reducer, right? That is generating all these states, right? We're going to make it a little more complex. Instead of just returning the same exact object always, we're going to have it perhaps listen to some events. Also, the function that is mapping the state to the properties, we're going to flesh it out, right? And we're going to create a proper function. So let's revisit this. So first, let's create a really simple hello component in its own component slash hello.js. Yes? All right, so let's do that. And so here, we're going to create directories here for the different types of things that we're going to need, right? So we're going to put all our components on the components directory, meaning any filing here, its only responsibility is to receive data as a property and just render it. That's all its responsibilities. So we're going to create here a hello component. So this will be hello component.js. Right, notice the naming convention. Right, all components are going to append the components keyword at the end. Right? And so this is going to be just a plain old React component. So React from React. And it's going to be, this could be a class component or it could be a functional component. Either one. Right? But typically, it's stateless. Typically, it could maintain its own state, but if it's a considerate amount of state, then it should be done by the reducer. All right. But if it's maintaining its own, local state, then that's okay, right? We could use here a class component as opposed to a functional component. So here we have hello component. It's just a function that's going to render what are we just hello. So this is h1 hello component. All right, and we're going to export this into the default package, the hello component. Excellent. If we go back to our app, for now we're just going to blow away our content here. We're not going to have the reducer. We're not going to have any of this. I'm just going to comment it out, and we're not going to have a provider just yet. Eventually we will. All right, but I just want to demonstrate this from scratch. I'll just blow it away. All right, so here's our hello component we just built. Hello component there. Hello, if I could type. There we go. So we're rendering the hello component. Everybody good? Right? Nothing spectacular there. Put this here. All right. So, and yes, we render the hello in the DOM. So we're not going to do that. That's already done. Right. So the state and the reducers. So this is what we're going to do. Here's a component, and we need to be able to generate these states, right, over time. So how do we connect these two? So first, we'll declare our component so that it can receive something as an argument. So here it's a message that it can receive. So here's our message, right? And perhaps it can render here the message. Okay. All right. Very good. We have that. And here's going to be our reducer. Reducer, as I mentioned earlier, is a pure function that whose responsibility is to tell me what the next state is. Right, so let's do that. So we're going to have all our reducers live under a directory called reducers. Right? If it's a simple application, then one reducer is plenty. But if it's a fairly complex application, you might have multiple reducers for different sections of your application. Yes? All right, so here we're just going to have one reducer, and we're going to call it the hello reducer. So hello reducer. Okay, and the only thing we have here is that it's going to be a function whose responsibility is to return a JSON object. So return, in this case, is message, and then says hello from reducer. That's all it's doing, and we're going to export it so that folks can import it. Hello reducer. Notice that it's just a function, right? It's not. There's no React here, right? It's just JavaScript. It's just all plain old JavaScript. It's ES6, yes, but no magic here. It's just a function. It's very important to understand that this is just a function. Once we have the reducer, we're going to create our container, right? Remember, the responsibility of the container is to grab the state coming from the store generated by our reducers and mapping it to properties that the component is expecting. Right? And our component has one property, I think it's called message. And we know that in the state, there's also a state variable called message. They don't have to be the same. The names don't matter, right? The mapping is done by the container. The container says, hey, grab this from the state and send it to the component for that property. Right? So let's create our container. So here's our container. Let's create our container. So our containers are going to live in directories called containers. Containers. And again, everything that lives in a container, its only responsibility is to do the mapping. Right, so let's create here our hello container. Oops. What? Oh, here we go. So the container, right? So the container, what's going to do? Notice that it's going to do the connect. There it is, connect. See that? It's going to connect, and as a function, and it takes as argument the hello component that's going to receive the property. Yes, right. Also, the first argument that it takes is a function that we called here the state to property mapper. It's just a function. It's just a function like we saw earlier. Again, this is part of the plumbing. The function is going to be invoked by the provider. Right? The provider is going to go all through all the containers and say, I'm going to call all the containers connect function. I'm going to pass it the state that's coming from the store. I'm going to pass it the state, and your responsibility is to extract data from the state and map it to the properties that the components are expecting. And that's exactly what this function is doing. You know, it's receiving the state from the provider, and the provider is going to grab the state variables and is going to generate a map with the properties that is expecting. Right. So let's do that. So it's going to have here. We're gonna have to import React from React. It's gonna need the component that eventually is gonna receive the properties. So we'll need the hello component. From components is way up here, right? So we're gonna go up and then down to the components, and we're importing this component because that's the components are gonna receive the property. Yeah, right. And what else? And we need to invoke the connect function, right? The connect function. Well, before we do that, here is our function, the state to property mapper function, right? This is going to receive the state variable that the reducer is generating. So this is the state variable, the state. That object is the state. That object is the state, and receives it as an argument, and it's just going to return. Another object, right? That is going to map whatever's in the state coming from the reducer, and it's going to map it into the property. Now, obviously, here is pretty trivial, right? The state variable in the state is called message, and the property that we're expecting is also called message, but not necessarily. Right? The state might be something fairly complex. It might be a very complex object. Yes, maintaining the entire state of a huge application. Whereas the components might be some little tiny little thing that we're rendering, right, in some subset of the application. Yes, right. It might only need just one little property, a little string to represent maybe the state, the data, or the date, or some on or off or something. Yes, right. but in the state, it might be buried into some really complex state variable. Make sense? So this function is, it kind of does the mapping, right? It maps what this data model is, which might be some fairly complex object, and then it iterates and retrieves this object, and then it maps it to what the property should be. So the component is expecting a message property. It's going to grab it from the state dot message in there. Okay, the state that is receiving from the argument here. So now the container, the hello container, is basically equal to the connect. Right, it's going to this takes as argument the mapper, and the component who's going to receive the map of all the properties that it's expecting. Right, we need to import the connect function. The connect function from connect from the React Redux library. And I think that's it. I think now we can just export this. So this is export and default the hello container. Okay, the hello container. And finally, right, we need to provide the store to these providers, right? So let's go back to the provider, to the top level application here in the app. We're going to load the provider, which we already have. We don't really need the connect anymore because the connect is way down in the container. We do need the provider. Let's provide it. I'm going to say provider. We need the store. We haven't created the store. We need to create the store. So const the store is equal to the create store. The create store needs a reducer. The reducer is in some function, right? It's under the reducer. So let's import that. Let's import our reducer. So import the reducer from the /reducers/ the hello reducer. So the create store takes as argument the reducer, the hello reducer. There it is. Hello, oh, just reducer, sorry. Reducer, and we're going to provide the store to the hello component. Okay? And let's see, it just says hello. Right, so that hello is coming from where? It's coming from our reducer. Our hello reducer, the message is, no, it's supposed to be hello from reducer. Wait a minute, what? Hello, our component, the message, where is the app? Component, store is the reducer, and the reducer is this hello reducer, and it's receiving hello from reducer. Might be not. I'm sorry? Where? In here? Import reducer. Hello reducer is reducer. Shouldn't matter. Hello reducer. Hello. Where is it getting that hello? Where? Oh, okay. So all right. So the message is not actually getting there. Yes. Oh, yes. Thank you. Hello container. I knew that. There it is. So hello from reducer. Yep. So yeah. So it's receiving the actual data from the state, right? That is being mapped by the container. The container is extracting that message, mapping to the message. Now notice these don't have to be the same. right? The names don't have to match. So just to demonstrate that, if we go into the reducer, the state might be message state, okay? State. And then the container's responsibility is to do the mapping again. So this might be message state, right? Mapping it to some property called message, right? So you get the same thing. Yes. That the so what happens is that the property, the provider, so the provider walks through all the containers, right, finds the containers, and it calls this connect function, right? When it instantiates the hello container, right? It calls the connect function, and the connect function passing it a whole bunch of things, passing a whole bunch of arguments. The connect function takes as argument two functions. We're only looking at the first function here, but it takes two functions, right? The first function is the state to property mapper, which you can pass as an argument, whatever that map is, and it passes the state that the provider passed it, right? So the connect function, the connect function receives a store, right, from the provider. The provider finds the container, it passes the connect, the state, the store, right? And then the connect does some magic and it calls your function, passing it the state that's grabbing it from the store that the provider passed it, right? It also takes as argument a second argument, which we'll see in a minute. But the first one is the state to property mapper, where it's your responsibility to do the mapping, right? Now it doesn't have to be a function. You could just grab a JSON, just paste it in here. So that's really what it needs. It just needs a JSON object that does the mapping. So what do I do with the state, and how do I map it to the properties that the hello component is expecting? Right? That's really what it needs here, right? But a function allows it to do this as a calculation. We could have a for loop in here. We can have all sorts of nested branches, right? That depending on our business logic, we can generate the new state, right, in the mapping. Okay. All right, everybody good? Right. Again, the only thing we've done here is that we looked at the first example and we've only spread it out so that each artifact lives in its own file, right? The reducers live in one file, the containers live in their own file, the component lives in their own file. That's the only thing we've done. All right. So let's go on to a next a little bit more complex example. My hope is that after you see this state mapping often enough, you'll see the pattern, right? And it just becomes secondhand, right? You feel confident about doing it on your own. Everybody good?